We're a foundation that started in 2010. Our main focus initially was with ex-situ, so captive conservation breeding programs for all of the different endangered species found in West Visayas and the Philippines as a whole. We started out with the Visayan spotted deer, a critically endangered species, and then from there we evolved into all of the other species that had different threats throughout the island. I grew up in Negros, so I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly, and there was a big need to do this kind of work here. If you look at the maps of Negros from 1898 to the current time, we've lost pretty much all of our forest cover except for the last remaining 4%. And out of the 4%, we have a good 1%, which is primary. As the forest was dwindling, hunting became a big thing. The animals were concentrated in these little pockets of habitats. So my parents, my grandparents, everybody did hunting as a pastime. So I was the little kid. And then from then, I saw the niche, the need to do some captive conservation work. Today, we have the first West Visayas Conservation Workshop. It's basically trying to discuss what is the future for what we have been doing this past 30 years. We're focusing on the West Visayan Big Five, which is the Walden's hornbill, the Visayan Turictic hornbill, the Visayan spotted deer, the Visayan wary pig, and the Negros bleeding heart pigeon.
In the Western Visayas, we have two hornbill species. And the interesting thing about them is that they only occur here. Because they are endemic, they're highly threatened because the Western Visayas lost a lot of forest. One of the species is a smaller and less specialized one, the Visayan hornbill. And the other one is the most specialized one, it's also a bit larger. That's the Walden's hornbill or Dulungan, like the locals, Panay call it. Many of the nests were poached before, like the people collect the nestlings, sell them to the pet trade, and some of the poaching was done unsustainably, if there's ever such a thing, because they cut down the whole tree, which destroys the nest for future breeding attempts. So preserving habitat is the best way to preserve the species. In terms of the species we are talking about here, the best habitat left is the Central Panay mountain range, where, for example, Walden's hornbill has this last foothold, is not protected. And my greatest wish would be that this part of Panay gets protected. Because if it gets protected on paper, it does not save it yet, but at least it gives us the support of the local government to undertake steps to keep it protected.
There is a general crisis in Southeast Asia. Deer have obviously been a target for hunting, but hunting picked up not only for subsistence, but for trade. The Visayan spotted deer, which to begin with had a fairly small distribution area, was hit pretty hard, and it's now considered an endangered species. We're probably talking about a species in a very bad situation, in a dire need of conservation help. This is where Talarak Foundation comes in. They actually manage a population that has been growing over the last few years. They've been doing fantastic work with their animals. So now we're at the point where we have a big enough captive population in the Philippines that could be used eventually for introduction. We're here at the workshop to discuss this possibility. I think it's in a stage that if they move just this one step further and get to the point that they release animals to the wild and they show that it is possible to do here in the Philippines, I think it will set a great example for other projects, not only to the conservationists, but also to the various authorities. And this is why we're so interested in this project specifically, because of where they're at, an opportunity to really get everybody else around to a higher level.
Just bringing them back into the wild, that is quite risky, because if you haven't addressed hunting or other threats, these animals will disappear immediately again. So we were thinking we need a quite high-level strategy planning to understand what the threats is, what the current distribution is, all these knowledge gaps. After we've done that, we were then thinking about what can we do. We started from the current situation, talked about where do we want to go, maybe in 20 years. And then in the end, we discuss how do we get to this vision in 20 years. The Visayan warty pig is endemic to the Philippines, to the island of Negros and Panay. It used to occur on other islands, but it's already extinct there. It's critically endangered mainly because of habitat loss, but also because of hunting. We want to try and conserve the whole diversity of these wild pigs. Pigs play a very important role in the ecosystem. They turn over the soil, they open the soil so nutrients can be circulated and oxygen can go inside. So this is a very important role in terms of engineering almost of the forest. We are supporting Talarak in their work with the breeding of the species. They're doing a fantastic job. I hope after this workshop everyone became quite clear what is missing in terms of knowledge, where we want to go in the future and what we have to do for reaching that goal. I hope that we can merge all the skills and the knowledge and the experience that we have into a very diverse and holistic group that will be able to actually save the species.
And that is really the purpose of the workshop that's been taking place here in Bacolod over the last few days. Bleeding heart doves as a group are endemic, that is to say they're only found in the Philippine Islands. And this particular species, the Negros bleeding heart dove, is limited to 2 islands. Negros, where we are today, and another island called Panay. They are critically endangered. The forest across both of these islands has been heavily logged. In more recent years, the species has also been threatened by pressure from an ever-growing human population and from direct persecution. These birds are hunted both for food by subsistence hunters and purely for recreation. So they're now thought to be right on the brink of extinction. So the Negros bleeding heart doves kept here at the Talarak Foundation, like those in the aviary behind me, are descendants from 3 birds that were recovered from the illegal wildlife trade way back in 2006. And those 3 birds were successfully bred, and there are now about 70 of their descendants in captive breeding centres here in the Philippines. Toledo Zoo has had a great deal of success in running conservation projects for this particular family of birds. So examples include our work on Samoa, where we've managed to successfully establish a captive breeding programme for the many-coloured fruit dove, and in the Solomon Islands, where we've led a project which recovered the last few individuals of the Santa Cruz ground dove, kept them safe in captivity, and managed to get them breeding for the first time. So the captive breeding programme for this species has undoubtedly been a success. But a captive bred population is never a conservation achievement in and of itself. We can't claim to have really saved this species until we've got flourishing and self-sustaining populations back in the wild. It's about saving entire ecosystems. It's about saving the forest here in places like the Philippines, to preserve intact forest and all the wonderful species that live there and which interact with each other in really complex ways that we still don't fully understand.